Can you talk about the boys and casting them and what you saw in each one for their role?
Yeah. It all just seems so simple. Brandon was himself. If you watch any of his Q&As, you can project anything onto him, and he's open to it. He's very porous. He's very pensive. He's not one to speak at length, but he's very articulate. He's just very present. And when he gave his casting tape, he was just Turner. He just presented himself as himself, who could be anything, who was Turner, which almost seems semantic. It's like, what are you talking about? But he was just so obviously a young, this is how he presented himself. He presented himself as himself from that time period. He wasn't acting like a character. He was just a boy from that time. And Ethan was probably the closest thing to a character in Colson's book. When he read, he just like exuded optimism and a type of hope and those eyes are unbelievable. Yes. I remember Joslyn Barnes, when he looks up from the table at Turner, oh man, it's gonna be crazy.
Yeah.
And last, you talked about your love for Southern photography and Southern. You managed to bring it in, in such ethereal ways in the technique of how those photos were blurred and textured. It was something that you worked on. Clearly, you worked on.
Yeah. I think there's almost nothing more impactful of a gesture, we thought, in having the real Dozier School boys' images in the film and using the archive from the Florida Memory Project to ground the film back in its source material, right? Because it's like Dozier School for Boys, then it's like Boys of the Dark, which was a nonfiction book that Colson used, Nickel Boys, the novel, and then Nickel Boys, the film. It like bends it back to Dozier, and then it's like, maybe cinema doing what cinema should always do, or always has the power to do, which is like bring us back to reality, but also in a entertaining, fantastic, and sensory way.
The treatment of black men, black boys becoming black men, it was so chilling and so heartbreaking.
Horrific.
Each step of the way. Have you experienced any of this in your life?
Whew, thank the Lord, no. Thank the Lord, no. I know that my dad has, and he grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, like in the middle of its race transition, and so, or kind of race integration riots at his schools, and so I have a lot of stories in the back of my head. Also a lot of stories about my grandfather on my mom's side, but I don't know if would have been able to make this film if that was the case, or it'd be a completely different film. I think the lens that I can take on it has everything to do with my wonderful family, my suburban upbringing, my ability to think, inconsequentially about money when I'm 23 years old, because I know that my family will let me come home if I run out. It's strange how having support and financial stability can allow one to talk about historical things in fresh ways. It's a strange connection,
Well, and that's what Hattie was trying to do.
Yeah.
And Aujanue Ellis-Taylor gives a tremendous performance, especially when she's just trying to unload that envelope.
Whew. Like, how simple is that scene? But yet, it's so powerful. She's just like an island of despair and like love and hope and optimism and confusion and cynicism, just standing out there, just has no idea what's going on or what to do. It's like, and I don't know, God, what an amazing scene.
Do you have a term for it, of the way you did it to involve the actors by making the other person the camera, really.
Well, we called it on set, Joe Mofray and I. Joe Mofray is the director of photography. We called it sentient perspective, in order to, we used POV like for the script because we needed people to kind of understand what we're talking about, but we're very aware that it's not just wide angle, GoPro, action, or Lady of the Lake, Hardcore Henry, any of the other films. It's definitely an advanced version of that in which we're way more interested in controlling the attention of the viewer as opposed to, and making that feel as alive and as observational as it feels like to be in our heads.
It's more like touchy-feely. I mean, it's where you really
I love that.
You have somebody that you are encountering and also communicating with on a very intimate basis.
It's so true. It is touchy-feely.
Speaking of touchy-feely, also by making the camera the character's eyes, you're choosing what the character wants to look at. And I'm thinking specifically about the beating scene. You never really see any blows land, but you feel them. And you feel them through what he's looking at. He's not looking at anything in particular. How did you come to that shot selection?
Well, it's thinking about, trying to take the sentient perspective, the POV, to its logical extreme, which is if a person is going through, the idea is to make the camera an organ, right? Bring it fully into the body. So the camera's into the head, it's looking. When a person's going through traumatic moments in their life, very rarely are they looking at the thing, right? I've hurt myself many times, screw in my foot, dislocated shoulders. After that initial look, I'm not staring at that part. It's more painful to acknowledge it in that way. You're often finding small details in order to survive the moment. And so cinema, though, has quite often done the opposite, maybe by necessity. Maybe it's the evolution of the language, where we constantly see, but that's still taking an outsider's perspective. From the inside, very rarely is there a mirror to see your own suffering.
How was it to try and keep the set either happy or, not as deep or as emotional?
How did you diffuse the pressure in those moments?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Films are made so fragmented, though, the scenes are all oneers. There's still, everyone's concentrating on their specific craft. And so it's easy to forget about the weight of what you're doing, especially when you have folks who are, one, dedicated, also good-humored, and there's kind of a lot of support around. We're not overly emphasizing the painful aspects of the story that we're telling. We're more executing and then hoping that the actors can elevate all of those integral pieces into something that feels a bit transcendent.
What scene got to you?
What scene got to me? Whew. Well, 2 scenes, maybe 3 scenes. The first scene that got to me in terms of, the beating scene, because Hamish just went so far, and filming that, you can't help but think about the truth of it, because this is based on a true story. And man, how horrible it felt to just be in the set design that Nora Mendez did. You can't help, her set design was so good. The boys that we were using or that were in the scenes as extras, they thought that it was already built. They thought that was the place. They just had no idea. It was terrifying. That was a tough one because we're inside of it, and if you forget for a second that there's a camera there, you actually feel like something horrible's happened. I also am really attached to the scene in the bar when Craig Tate just does something in which I've recognized in other films and always wonder, how did that happen? How was that moment that powerful? I can't believe they got that. But then being the director on a film, I'm like, oh, I don't know if the director can take responsibility for it. It's just like, it's just like magic. Yeah.